Well, hello, folks. This is Joe from MIGeekScene. I'm here at the Cherry Capital Comic Con with wonderful artist Jill Thompson.
Hi.
For those who don't know, Jill Thompson is the author and creator of the Scary Godmother series, Magic Trixie, Beast of Burden with Evan Dorkin, and the Wonder Woman, the True Amazon story.
Also, Finals with Will Pfeiffer.
Oh,
if you're listing things that I've created.
I've not actually read that.
Oh, you should go out and read that.
Well,
It's actually quite good for the political climate we're in today.
what label is that under?
It was Vertigo.
Okay.
It's been reissued as like Vertigo Resurrected or something like that.
Okay.
You can find it online.
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, Scary Godmother, that's how I first initially found out about you years ago through the public library.
Oh,
I just randomly picked up a book and I was like, oh, the artwork looks cool. So
I love to hear that.
I just started reading. It's an excellent children's series. Now, it was also turned into a TV show. Since you co-wrote the script for the Scary Godmother Halloween Spooktacular, how was the process of altering the story for TV?
Well, actually, it was a different process than just altering it from comics because we had adapted Scary Godmother books and comics into a play in Chicago, and we had done 26 performances of like a 1-hour children's play, and then that had been videotaped, and what we did was we adapted the play for the TV show. So we ended up cutting like 13 minutes of it and formatting it for commercial breaks and stuff like that.
Who wrote the Diablo pizza joke?
Me?
Okay. And were you also the one who wrote the sly Lincoln assassination joke?
Believe so. I wrote yeah.
Because I thought you had a co-writer for...
Oh, I do. I thought you meant in the actual comic. Yeah, Heath Corson, who writes comics for DC Comics now, he did the excellent new Bizarro series that came out with Gustavo. Now I can't remember Gustavo's last name. But it was like Bizarro and Jimmy Olsen together.
Okay.
Yeah, Heath and I wrote that together. We did a lot of improvisational collaborating around his dining room table as we were taking stuff, writing notes, coming up with stuff, back and forth with jokes. So I'll credit Heath for that joke only because we were probably goofing around and we were coming up with off-color jokes that would be appropriate for a vampire to say that would stop conversation dead in its tracks.
Because that came out of
pun
nowhere.
Intended. Oh, well, we have a sense of humor, but it was supposed to be one of those like moments. Yeah, so it came up while we were just, mulling stuff about as we were writing and adapting things, and then Heath did, take all of our notes and then format it. Or we sat together in front of a computer and like we're writing it at the same time. We would come up with stuff and put it in, then re-edit it. And it was a while ago, so.
Okay. You've mentioned that you did a play, obviously the comics for
Yep.
Scary Godmother 2 animated series, and now you have a new doll.
Because we did write, those jokes were in the play.
Oh,
So,
were they?
Yeah, so pretty much like it's almost exactly every single thing that was the play that you see on television.
Okay.
With a couple of extra things added and a lot of stuff taken out because it was a time constraint. So it wasn't that we wrote something different from the play. It's like we adapted the script from the play that we had written for television.
Okay.
Yep.
Are you working on new Scary Godmother stuff? Because I know you just recently introduced the doll to the market after a successful Kickstarter.
Yeah, a successful and very long production process to get this doll made. I am working on more Scary Godmother stories. So I'm also working on other freelance stuff, and personal projects sometimes fall to the wayside because you work on the freelance work that gives you the page rate. So
one of the series that I enjoyed after I found out about your artwork was Beast of Burden that you did with Evan Dorkin.
Yep.
My favorite character actually is Pugsley.
Pugs is
Because
a lot of people's favorite character.
We do share some personality traits.
Oh,
but-
really?
Yes.
Such as?
Well, skepticism,
Okay.
and but he does do the right thing in the long run. Like he will go help out, but like at first he's like, I don't really trust you so much. When I'm first meeting you, I got to really get to know you and stuff like that. So
Are you
You're-
talking about more with the Hellboy story?
No, I wasn't able to read that actually.
Oh, okay. 'Cause that's a good one.
The only thing that I've read for Beasts of Burden was the Animal Rights collection that Dark Horse released, and just recently released too.
Right.
So,
But then there's been some single issues that have come out, including a one that was a Hellboy crossover, and a lot of people have brought that up. And Pugs has a great amount.
oh really? Because
of
I've
stuff
tried
happening
tracking
in
that down
one.
online, but
Oh, really?
either it was seriously expensive or it was just out of print, at least on Amazon and stuff like
Oh,
that.
well,
And-
I would say you probably should go to your local comic shop and see if they can order it for you, because
It's still available?
it should be still available.
Because
I don't know. I haven't tried to order one, but I see them around, and people will say, "Oh, I just picked this up," so I'm assuming they're getting it from someplace.
Okay. From what I understand, you had made a suggestion to introduce a pug into the story. So,
I'm guessing, because everyone loves pugs, and my friend Mike Norton had 2 pugs, and he was doing his Battle Pug book. Well, that Battle Pug came well after, but he had these cute pugs, and then I saw baby, like puppy pugs. And they're just like the tiniest little balls of Smiley with the curly tail, and everyone seems to love a pug. So
I'm a big fan of corgis myself. I'm allergic to dogs, but if I could have a dog, I'd have a corgi in a heartbeat.
yeah, I am a cat person, but I do love dogs. I just have never owned one, and I want to have all of the dogs that we have in Beasts of Burden.
Okay. I'd like to delve into some other things. Charles Schultz of Peanuts influenced your own character called B-Dog. Did you ever have the opportunity to relay that story to him?
Oh, no, I never had a chance to meet Charles Schultz. I would have loved to, and I never really did any published stories with B-Dog ever. I have explained about B-Dog a lot to students that I've had, or when I talk at schools and libraries and stuff, because the people always ask you about the first thing you created, and that was the thing that I spent a lot of time as a kid doing before I then started doing my Archie knockoff with all the kids in my neighborhood growing up as teenagers.
All right. Now, before you created the Scary Godmother series, you were into goth fashion. So, were you into goth music as well, like bands like The Cure, Baja, Sisters of Mercy?
Oh, sure. Ministry, I liked a lot.
Al Jorgensen.
That's good dancing music. I like to go dancing, so industrially gothy music is always good for that.
Did you like Typo Negative or Nine Inch Nails?
Yes, very much so. I still like them. I'm one of those people who's like, I like the 90s channel, like.
No, for sure, man. Like, I have all of Typo's albums and the majority of Nine Inch Nails. Like, I was deeply saddened when Peter Steele had passed away a few years back, I was fortunate enough to see Typo Negative 3 times.
I did not. I was not. I didn't have a chance to see a lot of bands live. But I still listen to other music.
Okay, so what other watercolor artists do you enjoy? Like, from what I understand, because I did some research into you, I found out about Holly Hobby with her Toots and Puddles series.
Oh, yeah. Toot and Puddle was that's a children's book series I just love the illustration for. And she was just a big influence on, format and how much, being really direct and creating a mood with your little characters. Who have been my watercolor influences? That's kind of odd. I don't know if I really have any. I mean, there's watercolors that I admire, but I don't study them to try and learn more. Like my watercolor teacher in school, Irving Shapiro, was a big influence on me because he was the person I studied under, but just to become proficient in watercolor. And then I took what I learned and just started drawing comics with it, as well as doing some traditional watercolor painting. I love all sorts of watercolor artists. I mean, certain masters. I mean, Winslow Homer and Sargent and anyone that's and English watercolor painters, I don't have the same type of patience that they did. I mean, I see, you know, you go to the Art Institute and you'll see a painting that's like this size, but in a book, I've always seen it in a book, and I always think it's huge, or at least 20 by 30 or something, and it turns out to be just maybe 9 by 11, if that, 8 by 10 at some point, and apparently, and they'll say it took them 3 years to complete. And I have no idea how anybody has that kind of patience or hasn't overworked their watercolor, because English watercolorists were known for layering in such light washes to create the technique that they want. I like a lot of Disney animators when it comes to painting, background painters, like the Japanese artist who did all the backgrounds for Bambi. I look back at those a lot. They're just the amount of time and effort that they put into studying to making something look real. Also, the background animation, the background paintings for Snow White, also has been a big influence on me. But I don't know the artist's name to attribute those paintings to.
We can pause this since he's here.
Hello. How are you today? What are you doing? How's your show? Did you cosplay today? No? Me neither. I just kind of look like the character. Oh, I like your shirt.
Oh, thank you. Ready?
What are you looking for today? What's your favorite thing? Star Wars?
WWE.
Oh, WWE.
Yeah.
He's a huge wrestling fan.
Which AJ Styles? He's good.
The phenomenal one.
Right. Well, I design all of the clothes for Daniel Bryan.
Huh? It's really cool.
Somebody has to.
Yeah, I know, right?
No, he's a really great guy.
Is he?
Yep.
That's awesome.
It's fun. It's kind of like making your own giant wrestling doll. Like, I draw something, he likes it, some other guy sews it, and then it shows up on TV.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's really cool.
So you meet with him regularly, or just
I used to see him, but I don't get a chance to see him
Not too much.
now. I
Right.
mean, mostly he's on TV every day of the week, right?
Right, exactly.
But I text him on occasion, and he
Yeah.
texts me. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Hi.
I've always enjoyed listening to interviews with Bryan Daniel Bryanson. I love the Art of Wrestling podcast with Cole Cabana and stuff like that.
I do too.
So-
I love that podcast. It was, yeah, I listened to that one. I like the new format he's got.
Oh, okay. I've been out of it for a bit because I would listen to it weekly. And this is not part of the interview, but it's just like I would listen to it weekly because for a while he was like my favorite wrestler. First it started with RVD, and then when I started finding out about indie wrestling because of ROH, you know, I became a huge fan of ROH. And I loved the Second City Saints, you know, Ace Steel and whatnot. And like I would grab as many ROH DVDs as I possibly could.
They're good wrestling.
I really enjoyed that. So yeah.
People ask me if I mean, well, if you might ask me this later, so I'll save the.
I do have some wrestling questions because I really was hoping to talk with you about pro wrestling because from what I understand, you're quite the fan, and
I'm a fan.
it definitely shows, especially like little hidden references that you've thrown, especially the wrestling match in the pumpkin patch. For
Well,
the
that, and also if you look at that one. The
Oh
second
snaps! I
part-
didn't even see that.
Yeah.
Because-
so it's one of the parts.
If I was to go a little bit kayfabe, you made me pop when you were saying like I think she can appreciate the bumps that I take, you know.
Oh, yeah?
So, all right, we'll go back into this. 3, 2, 1. I watched a wonderful documentary called She Makes Comics. Were you at the first Friends of Lulu meeting in 1994?
No,
All right, I guess that's that.
I was not.
All right.
I have won a Lulu award, but I was not at Friends of Lulu meeting. I don't even know if I'm a member of the Friends of Lulu.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if there's a membership, or like it's something someone belongs to, or it's just something you support. I mean, I always just thought it was something you support.
All right. Now, there's something that I found out about you that made me very happy. Death at Death's Door and Dead Boy Detectives are in the manga style, and you're a fan of manga. What draws you to manga? And do
Oh
you
my
have any
God, these
favorite
questions
series?
are so hard to answer because I started liking manga before manga became prevalent in the United States. So I would have to search out manga at like Japanese grocery stores or come to cons like this and they would have anime, but it wasn't anime that was ever even licensed here. It's like you would be buying a bootleg tape of a copy of a tape of a copy of a tape. So it was like grainy. Like my first time I ever saw My Neighbor Totoro was, I mean, I don't even think I was seeing it in the actual color that it was because it had been copied so many times and it was in Japanese. So once things started to catch on much later and people started publishing different mangas, it allowed me to be able to read series that I had either only seen in their original anthology style comics in from places that would just resell old Japanese comics, but they were in Japanese. It was, you never knew if you were getting something that was 4 years older than what you just had. It was like, well, where's that favorite thing that's in here? So it's not. And at science fiction and science fiction conventions, I would go and look for anime. So like some of my first anime that I got introduced to was like, Captain Harlock and other, like, of course, Astro Boy and
Osamu Tezuka.
yeah, so things like that. But then when, like, some of my favorite series that once they were translated was like Peach Girl, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this, Miwa Ueda, and I like stuff by Clamp. I like Cardcaptor Sakura. I liked.
Triple Holic.
But now
Or Holic, should I say.
there's so much out there. I can't even accurately cover what I have read and what I'm interested in now. But the fun thing is every time I go to a convention overseas, there are other things that are licensed in other countries. They're super popular at their cons that I've never seen before. But it's in 2 foreign languages then. So it's like it's a Japanese thing that was translated to Portuguese or a Japanese thing that was translated into Spanish or Italian. And I was like, well, we don't have this one. So sometimes I buy them just to help me learn other languages.
I mean, did you ever check out Cowboy Bebop?
I have. I get it. It doesn't hit me.
It doesn't?
Not the way it hits everybody else. I appreciate it, okay. I like, I butcher this name all the time. There's a manga called the Kuragawa Corpse Delivery Service.
Yes, I know
Is
exactly.
that the right word?
I want to say Kurosaki Corpse Delivery.
Kurosaki? Okay.
Which
yeah,
is a spin-off title of MPD Psycho as well.
Oh, okay. I don't know what that one is.
Actually, all right, so there was a series called MPD Psycho that was very serious. It stood for Multiple Personality Detective.
Oh, wow. That sounds interesting.
So, yes, like this person had multiple personalities and it would help him solve horrific crimes. And then Kurosaki Corpse Delivery was set after that. And
Okay.
it obviously you know what that's about. But it was definitely more comedic at times, and I've loved like the numerous references to other shows in that manga series.
Because the Kurosaki, is it Kurosaki?
Kurosaki Corpse Delivery. Kurosaki or Kurosagi.
Kurosaki Corpse Delivery Service. There's a story in there that I use to illustrate excellent pacing and storytelling to my students, because it gives me a visceral, physical reaction on a page turn, and I'm trying to tell them they always should build things up the same, like to evoke a response the way that evoked a response from me. I would show it. I can never figure out what volume it's in, so I can't. I'm gonna have to find it when I get home and like take pictures of it so I can refer back to it when I need to. What else have I read? Like Death Note, Battle Royale. What's the all the horror by Junji Ito.
Uzumaki.
Uzumaki, man. Oh my gosh. I think that's actually the only one I read. I won't read it. It scares me after that, so I don't want to read it anymore. It's like creeps me out. But I love like beautifully rendered styles of Japanese artists. Oh, one of the first ever translated mangas that I read that I love dearly is My the Psychic Girl, which
Okay.
A lot of people are not familiar with, but people my age who first started seeing manga will know it.
I have heard of it.
Yeah, so it's about this schoolgirl who gets psychic powers. And there are other kids around the world that also have psychic powers, and some of them are good, and some of them are being used by governments for evil. Super photorealistic illustrated backgrounds, and then really like simple but beautiful, more realistic for a manga, especially because they look ethnically Japanese. The Japanese characters, and then the Caucasian characters look more Caucasian because there's German people and I think Dutch people in it. But it just doesn't look like stylized manga style people. Beautiful, love that. Show that to my students as well as, backgrounds people. You need to draw backgrounds so we know where it is. You can't, this story would not be as effective if it wasn't set in the place that looks so real.
Are you familiar with Berserk by Kentaro Miura?
No, I'm not.
It's
Wait, I'm seeing something in my head when you say that, but it might not be the thing you're thinking of.
The series has been out for like 30 years, and he's still working on it. Like
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that's amazing.
But it's like, it's not like volume 38. Yeah, I'm getting super nerdy into this, but it's like I've felt that this has had some great storytelling. Like it starts off like where
Wouldn't
he's
it be great that you have that's your following, and you've created a world that you can just continue on. What's my name? I hear my name. What was that? Oh, okay. I thought I had to do something. I heard my name in the air, and I had to go to a panel or something.
But no, he's been working on it. Like he's taken long hiatuses.
Mm-hmm.
Like 1 year he's like, I'm gonna take a year off to play dating simulations. But his work is so great.
It's a dating simulation.
Moe games. Those are dating simulation video games over in Japan.
Okay.
But his work's so incredibly detailed. It's a dark fantasy medieval manga series.
Wow. That sounds really good.
It's incredibly violent. It's incredibly brutal. But
Vagabond I liked.
Oh, yes.
Now you're thinking of something
based
feudal.
on Musashi.
Yeah.
So, man, Berserk, his artwork is so detailed. I'm wondering, like, how are your hands not gnarled after you get done doing all of this stuff?
You don't know. They probably are.
It's just a great series that I've been following, and I will follow this to the very end of it, And it's basically a big revenge story about, some guy named Guts who finally found a family that cared about him, and then he ended up getting royally screwed over by someone he thought cared about him.
Oh,
and it's
no.
now a revenge story. That's all I can go into it, but there's a lot of dark fantasy in this series. Now, another subject that we both share a common love for is pro wrestling.
Yes.
So, what draws you to pro wrestling? What is it about that? I just love the soap opera aspects of it and the physicality that goes in the ring, because I appreciate what those athletes can do to entertain us.
Oh my gosh. Well, you've answered the question for me, because those are two of the major factors of what I like about wrestling. The story, the soap opera and story aspect of it is what I liked, especially when there was more story. I like good wrestling. I think the contest that happens because of the story should be really excellent. But I like the stuff that used to happen backstage, or where they would have a camera that would follow people home or into, onto the street to do matches. I always liked when the match went outside of the arena. Of course, that's no good for the people in the arena, but it's great for people watching at home. And I like some humor in my wrestling. I feel like you can't have the serious stuff mean as much if you don't have some comic relief, like and some brevity. As far as WWE goes, some of my favorite bits were like when Mick Foley was kind of technically mankind torturing Vince McMahon all the time with his like earnest stuff. Like when he was in the hospital and he came with Yurple the Clown.
Yurple the Clown.
And did things like that. I like, of course, nobody sells annoyance better than Vince McMahon, but to put himself in that position with like a little hospital gown on, and of course Steve Austin coming in and always doing something awful to Mr. McMahon, that stuff was hilarious. It was, you know, I don't know if they would do stuff like that today. And I certainly don't think they would spend as much time focusing on it, which is a shame because I think it made everything in the ring work a lot more.
I mean, I really enjoyed the Attitude Era. Like, I got into it near the tail end of it
Mm-hmm.
because I used to watch wrestling as a kid, you know, Owen Hart, Bret Hart, you know, Shawn Michaels, and oddly enough, Dino Bravo. Like, that was a name that stood out to me when I was a kid, but then I got out of it for a while. And then I came back because I heard that Goldust at the time would be doing Manson Dust, and I was a big fan of Marilyn Manson back in the day. I was like, I want to check this out. And then I got hooked back into pro wrestling.
Thank God it was Marilyn Manson Dust and not Charles Manson Dust.
Yes. But I got pulled back into wrestling, and I was very thrilled with it. Do you have any favorite wrestlers currently?
I don't want to put anybody on
I know
the
this.
spot. Oh, gosh.
I'm sorry. It was just like, these are things that I really...
Dolph Ziggler.
Nice.
He doesn't get enough credit for what he can do. I really think they missed the boat, like not giving him enough time to be champion a couple of years ago. I thought he could be a great heel champion, but his physicality is pretty amazing, and he sells it like crazy for everybody. In that, I mean, like now I'm still like going through a bunch of federations in my head because I don't want to leave people out. Daniel Bryan, of course.
Punk?
He's not wrestling anymore.
Well,
he's
yeah,
my
sorry, I did
favorite
say current
MMA
wrestling.
fighter, I would say. Then
That's all right. Forgive me. I did say current wrestlers.
you said current, so
Yeah,
I wasn't going back. I'm trying to think of like, and I haven't watched wrestling in like 4 weeks, so who knows who's out.
I'm
Okay,
glad that
favorite
Nakamura
wrestlers.
came over.
Yeah, super glad of that. I would say I'm Sasha Banks. I'm super happy seeing all the female wrestlers. Their matches to me are the main events. You know, like
Absolutely. That match between Charlotte and Asuka.
the Royal Rumble. The female Royal Rumble was like the Royal Rumble. Yeah, Charlotte and Asuka. I was hoping that for WrestleMania, Shinsuke Nakamura would have fought both of the wrestlers and like taken both the guys on, and I also thought that Asuka should have taken both Charlotte and like somebody else on, because I think that they could totally have done it. It would have been incredible.
I mean, it caught me off guard. Like, I was so happy that both Asuka and Shinsuke Nakamura had won the Royal Rumble matches, and then it caught me off guard that they both lost. I thought at least one of them would have won at WrestleMania. But that match between Charlotte Flair and Asuka, I thought, for me personally, was the match of the night. I enjoyed that more than anything else because those two ladies went out there and they told a story. And Charlotte Flair selling that arm to do the figure eight, you know.
I mean, to me, so much of wrestling is about selling the moves. It's the physicality of being able to do those things is incredible. And God, I wish I could do that stuff. I wish I had the cardio of those ladies. But
Well, if that's the case, then would you have like a wrestling character picked out for yourself if you were to do pro wrestling?
not at this moment. I couldn't think of something off the top of my head. I'm sure I could. It could be easy. I could come up with a lot of wrestling characters to go with certain types of gimmicks, because I think I like a gimmick-driven character. Just to move a story along, because to me that you should have weird archetypes. I'd probably be more like something in Glow versus
Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. Nice reference right there.
Well, there is actually. When I used to do improv, and when Glow first came out, like the original Glow, when it was coming out, the guy that was running our improv group immediately took all the girls, all the women that were doing improv, and did a photo of us Glow style, and called us Gloy, Gorgeous Ladies of Improv. And there's a picture I put on my Instagram that shows, because Mark found it and posted it on Facebook for me. So I grabbed that because it was funny, because we did, we were playing off the fact that that was really popular and in culture back in the day, and we're trying to do improv style that was all female troupe that would go on and take bookings.
I would check out Glow when I was a kid, but I never knew that Ivory was a part of the original Glow back in the day until they had that documentary come out. And I was like,
that was a great documentary.
I was like, wow, was not even expecting that.
Yeah.
And I will have to say this.
She looks like pretty much the same.
For sure. I'll have to say this, though. I am immensely jealous of you because you got to experience the original ECW back in the day.
Oh, my gosh.
From the Marty DeRosa podcast, Wrestling with Depression, you had mentioned that, Sabu had dove off the balcony right onto New Jack, like right next to you. And he pushed me out of the way. In fact, but he was really nice about it. He was like, "Excuse me, sweetheart." And then he just climbed up onto the balcony and dove off. I mean, I had to stay up, I got into ECW just as it was, going to, and when it went to TNN back in the day, and, one of the first matches I saw was RVD versus Jerry Lynn. Blew my mind. I've been a huge fan of RVD. It's certainly Jerry Lynn.
It was awesome to see him make the ring post to ring post leap.
The Van Terminator?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, sometimes the thing about going to ECW shows was, the crowd was, crazy. Not necessarily the best people as far as, they're out of control dudes a lot. I mean, I know that sometimes there would be fights in the audience that would happen while matches were going on. And, but, super passionate fans. Sorry, I was thinking of all the shows that I've gone to. But man, the wrestling was amazing. It's just you couldn't believe that people would do that.
I'm super envious of you. The first wrestling show I ever went to was the WWF one, and it was in Grand Rapids where The Rock was giving a eulogy for Steve Austin, and then when Steve Austin came in with the monster truck and ran over the hearse.
That's gotta be great.
That was my favorite. I mean, that was my very first wrestling show.
What great promos.
Oh yeah, for sure. Rock was. I mean, back in the day, I felt like they did better promos than compared to today because, I'm being that mark, but I know that things are scripted now instead of being off the cuff, and I felt that was better. And that's why I've always enjoyed indie pro wrestling like PWG, ROH, even Chikara. Chikara does PG. Chikara does PG wrestling.
Chikara is fantastic. That's some of the funnest shows I've ever been to.
Ultraman is Black.
Los Ice Creams.
Oh, yes, for sure.
I've done some covers for when they do posters, but they've been doing some comics and stuff. So I did Silver Ant was my favorite, and then Green Ant. But
I always enjoyed Ultramantis Black, and Chikara does pro wrestling, PG pro wrestling, great, and they have great comedy spots in there too.
Yes, I love the comedy spots.
I mean, one of my favorite ones was this Michael Nakasaki. He kept putting oil on himself, and so none of the wrestlers could get a hold on him.
That's a great idea.
So you can find it on YouTube actually. So they put him in a headlock, he'd pop right out. They put him in a wrist lock, he'd slide right out. So they had to grab a towel in order to do a hold on him.
I want to know what the ring announcing was happening at that same time, because to me that's great. You should be able to.
Oh yeah, no.
You should be commenting about what's going on. But then, of
the
course,
commentary was great on there.
Sure.
I think it was Bryce. He was he just keeps putting on more oil. No, just stop with the oil. And then it backfires on him, and it's hilarious. But you can look that up on YouTube.
Do it Jim Ross style, where you would be attributing maybe a move to it. It's obviously they're going to have to bring the the Southwestern towel maneuver in to counter this type of hold. That would be awesome.
I mean, it was it made sense logically to me that they would bring in a towel to at least try to apply a hold to him, but it's great. If you can look that up in your free time,
I will have to look at. Well, that's one of those.
I can tweet that out to you.
That's one of those YouTube holes that you slide down. It's I'm just gonna look at this one wrestling match, and then suddenly 6 hours later, oh no, I should have been working this whole time. I'm watching. What did I start to watch? Oh, the towel.
I'm sorry for planting that seed into your head,
Oh,
but
well, that's okay.
so you mentioned ECW. One of my favorite and saddest documentaries was the rise and fall of ECW. And you mentioned you watched
I did
wrestling
watch that one.
wrestling documentaries. Were there any other wrestling documentaries that you've enjoyed? I liked Punk's wrestling documentary.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Beyond the Mat was a good one.
Okay, yes.
I like that one a lot. God. Oh, I hate this. This is like, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite
I'm-
record?
I'm
I can
sorry.
never think of it.
I'm sorry for
but
putting
if
you on
we're
the spot.
sitting- No, if we're sitting there and if we're sitting, and we are just kind of chatting. But if there wasn't a time limit on it, eventually I would remember stuff. God, I can't think of all the wrestling documentaries that there have been. I like Wrestling with Shadows, actually, about Bret Hart. That was pretty interesting. I don't know, there's so much stuff to watch nowadays that you forget what you watch because I watch so much things during the day while I'm working. It's like I go from one thing to another thing, and sometimes it'll be like all wrestling documentaries, or it'll be some wrestling, then some environmental documentary, then I'll listen to a podcast like the Sasquatch Chronicles or something, or
I've only been able to check out Cabana's first Wrestling Road Diaries documentary.
that's a good one too.
With-
Yeah, thanks.
I like Sal Renoro and Bryan Danielson. I like that commercial for it, and it's like, Bryan, you're not even driving anywhere. Why are you steering? And like you could just see like Bryan doing his best not to crack up. You're like, shut up, Sal. You know.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to wrestling podcasts and
Art of Wrestling's
paranormal
great.
podcasts and true crime podcasts. So my day is like very strange. And then I'll watch the Great British Baking Show or something like that while I'm working.
Oh my goodness. I have to ask this. If Mick Foley was to create another Tales from Wrestle Lane book with you, which current wrestlers would you like to include?
Well, I kind of included all of them in the first Tales from Wrestle Lane, and I have character sketches of so many wrestlers that didn't make it in there. Like I had the Big Show, I had X-Pac, I had a beautiful Eddie Guerrero on this like really tricked out little bicycle.
May you rest in peace, sir.
Yes, may you rest in peace.
I think Bailey would probably be a cool addition.
Well, I see. The thing is I would just start drawing all of them as little chibi wrestler characters, and then Mick just would write a story, and he wouldn't base it on something he'd already drawn. He would just base it on an idea he had. So I think he would probably do something that would focus on some of the lady wrestlers, but you know, it's what gimmicks can you use to make further a story, you know? So in the ones that he did do, he was able to do it because he was taking the bravado or the ego of Kurt Angle and making him actually a scaredy cat. And then, so it's what else? And then with the Dudley Boys and Steph, it was, you know, that was kind of a natural mix because she was supposed to be all prim and proper and wanted a certain thing, and they were crude and awful.
Or I mean, maybe the news story will be set in an orphanage, and El Generico would be the one who's running it.
Oh.
Because, you
That's
know,
an idea.
he's wrestling for those orphans. I mean, that's why Sami Zayn is now about, but a wrestler who wrestled like him, El Generico, is now back at home in the orphanage taking care of the kids.
I haven't watched, so I didn't know that.
You
I
never
don't
see
know.
El Generico and Sami Zayn in the same spot.
Curious.
So, all right, as we're wrapping this up, and
Actually, I am doing a story with Mick Foley coming up.
Really?
Yeah, in Headlocked, the comic Mike Kingston puts out that
Okay.
wrestlers contribute stories and stuff to, drawn by Michael Mulipola, who actually is one of my favorite wrestlers. He's Liger down in New Zealand.
Liger, not Juice and Thunder Liger, but just Liger.
Just Liger. I
Okay.
think just Liger.
Because I was going to go, oh my God, you know Jushin Thunder Liger? That would have blown my mind.
That's from New Japan, right?
Yeah, it's a Japanese guy that's been around for
Yeah,
decades.
he's not Japanese. He's Samoan, so.
Okay.
And he's my favorite comic artist wrestler. Well, oh wait, no, I can't. Then Andy Bellinger also is a good wrestler, so I shouldn't count him out either. So
No, this
there's
is great. This is
two
absolutely
comic
great.
artists that are actually actively wrestling and also illustrating wrestling comics and other comics at the same time.
There was a wrestler from PWG called Chris Bosch, and apparently, no, not Chris
Sounds
Bosch.
familiar.
I forgot his name. Forgive me. Forgive me, folks. Like, I'm huge into pro wrestling, but there was a wrestler who was also an artist, retired from pro wrestling to focus on being a comic book artist. He was in a tag team with Joey Ryan back in the day.
That's the thing. Like you asked me about like
Not Scott Easy.
there's such a crossover. Like it always seemed that when I would meet a professional wrestler, I would meet them obviously at a comic book convention for the most part because they're either a guest or actually attending, and they're fans of comics and I'm fans of wrestling. So we start complimenting each other on the stuff that you do, and then I ended up collaborating with a lot of people. But I mean, that's how I met Raven, how I
Ooh.
met the Hurricane, who is a fantastic guy. He's like one of my favorite wrestlers ever, always. And he's super funny, and I miss his promos and his gimmicks and his comedy in ring everywhere. I miss just like his reaction to stuff and his super quick ability to come up with something improvisationally funny that may not have been scripted. But met him at a comic book convention and became good friends with him. Met Mick at a comic book convention, became friends with him. He's a really good friend of mine. Then because I collaborated with Mick, I ended up being able to meet, I would do book signings with him, and then I would get to go to like pay-per-views if they were around, or sometimes like big pay-per-views, and he took me backstage and
I'm
was
so
like,
jealous.
Jill, I have to go off and do this thing in the ring now. Do you want to sit back here? And so I like ended up talking to, Adam Copeland and
Edge.
becoming friends with him, and then talked to William Regal, and Mick would come back. He goes like, Jill, are you okay? I was like, are you still talking to people? I was like, oh yeah, I can talk to everybody. I'm fine.
So jealous
And
of
it was
you.
really nice. And then at one point he would just like kind of leave me backstage, and I would kind of sit there, and people were like, who are you? What are you doing here? And I would tell them what I was doing, and then we just kind of chat for a while. But it was really fun to see all that kind of stuff, to be backstage and see the enormous amount of crazy work and the people you never see, the production people and the costume people and people that are getting props ready and like setting up cameras, and everybody's standing backstage watching things on monitors. And
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, especially meeting William Regal.
he's lovely to talk to.
One of my favorite ribs that I got to see, not live, was like it was in England when William Regal was coming home to the hometown. He was wrestling Bryan Danielson. Daniel Bryan Danielson. So as Regal's coming down, instead of they were playing his current theme song, and then they switched into when he was a man's man.
Oh, I love that
And like Bryan's cracking up in the ring, and Regal is just like, I can't believe you did. But he still went with it, and then they went back into the song. But it was a nice rib that they pulled on him.
I loved that little promo. Wasn't he like chopping wood and like doing lumberjack stuff?
Yes.
And it was like
A real
Yeah.
man's man, William Regal.
like here's a question for you. What are your favorite like entrance musics or gimmicks that failed but they were still so kind of great over the top and or awful over the top that you wanted them to continue?
Well, actually, like, I'm sorry it never took off, but I enjoy Christian's Christian.
I was gonna say that exact one. Oh, I love that. I wish he would have kept that. I really thought that they could do something. I loved it every time.
Especially when they went
played
into German, and I was like, I have no idea what they're saying, but this is so great.
That was the first one on my like to bring up. I really like that one. I also like Edge and Christian's awesome pot of awesomeness.
Oh yeah, one of my favorite.
I
promos.
like when they giggle together.
Oh my God.
It's the best.
Have
If
you
haven't
heard the
listened
sad
to-
ballad of little Dave Bautista? When they had Bryan Gerwick on as their guest, and he
I
tells
don't
this
think so.
fantastic story of Dave Bautista that they had created. Like, there was apparently the throwaway promo that Ric Flair was supposed to bump up Dave Bautista, but they wanted to give him backstory, and apparently Dave Bautista was an orphan. So the way that was the story that Vince came up with. So
No, I
the
don't
way
think I know
Brian
that one.
Brian Gerwick, the way Brian Gerwick described it, he's like, Ric Flair. He's like, I'm paraphrasing. He's like, okay, big man, you're gonna walk down that aisle. You're gonna smash in the ring. Also, you're an orphan. Woo! Like he just threw it in there. If you find that clip, it is hilarious.
Okay.
So then Edge and Christian backstage created a song to Dave Bautista.
Oh.
To the Dave Bautista song. They put lyrics to it, and it was about Dave Bautista's parents, Stan and Judy Bautista, apparently kept dropping him off at an orphanage, at a foster home, and it's hilarious.
And he kept finding his way home. Is what
No,
you're
no,
saying?
they was like, why did you leave? I'm so scared on my own. Duly noted, little Dave Bautista, we must leave you with this foster family. They just kept dishing him, though, and it's
No.
this is a hilarious story. And that podcast is great.
Well, I love that podcast for Tales from the Indies for Tommy, for Tommy Dreamer, and then
Tommy.
Poor Tommy. And then I like actually the book I have in front. The Gertrude is Great. Gertrude the Great is written by Mrs. Tommy Dreamer.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Beulah McKillicuddy? Or is it Teresa? That's your name?
I'm not sure how. I always just say, because I'm never sure if I'm supposed to break kayfabe about her.
Oh yeah, don't break kayfabe.
Anyway.
Don't break kayfabe.
Then so that I like, and I like when they have somebody on, when they had Hurricane on. I'm not sure if he's been on more than once, but when it was all of them just sitting around. And none of them are in the same room, of course, but as if they were sitting around talking about junk that happened to them on the road. Because some of the best stories I've ever heard have been sitting around a table having food with some of these guys, and they'll just talk about the crazy stuff that happens when they're on the road or with crappy little promotions, or there's evil promoters that try and steal money and all this kind of stuff that happens. And I was like, those are the stories I want to illustrate. I was like, can you please just write that down and give it to me, and I want to illustrate that story. So but when Hurricane's on there, he was telling road stories. It had me laughing so much, I almost snorted coffee through my nose. It was great. And Edge and Christian, more Hurricane on your pot of awesomeness.
One of my favorite promos backstage, just Edge and Christian had just got back after wrestling the Hurricane and someone else. I think it was Rosie, and he was Edge was like, dude, what was going on back there? Way to get chokeslammed by Hurricane. And Christian was like, dude, he's a superhero. They were just totally put him over. So.
Oh, you mean actually on TV? Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. Oh, I love when they do that. That's totally necessary. If you don't believe the character's gimmick, then it falls flat. It's the first rule of improv. It's the person on stage with you is the most important person. And if you treat them that way and they treat you that way, and you treat the scene as the most important thing that you're supposed to deal with, then you have a great scene. And that's, to me, the wrestling ring is just a giant superhero improvisational ring where things happen that they didn't plan for. Well, it's an injury or whatever, or whoever's calling the match, and you have to go with it. You have these points that you're supposed to hit, but you have to get to them in a certain way. And then if something happens unexpectedly, you have to be able to deal with that. And there's so much going on. And the fact that they can keep focused with 1 million people watching, and then people recording that, and still make sure that they're present to the camera side so you can see it the best way possible is pretty outrageous.
Like that great double turn when Austin was wrestling Bret Hart, where Bret Hart came in as the face. When Bret Hart came in as the face and Austin was a heel, and then mid-match, Austin ended up leaving as the face. When Austin didn't tap out and he passed out when Bret put him in the sharpshooter. I don't know which WrestleMania that was, but that was a very pivotal moment.
I know, that's I'm not enough of a wrestling nerd to be able to do that, but I don't have that weird, I don't even know what you call it, wrestling Asperger's, where you can.
Oh my goodness.
It's a good way. I'm using that in a good way.
Okay, that's fair.
People that can remember the statistics about certain things, they may not be able to oh, I forgot that we were supposed to meet for coffee today, but if you mentioned that, they would say what match it was, what city it was in, and then all the other matches that happened to it. It was how do you remember those statistics? My friend Pat can do it. My friend Doug can do it. Bryan could do it. Everybody everybody could
it's
do it
just one of
except
those
me. I
things.
just remember the storyline. I remember what the guys were wearing. It's like, oh, that's when they had these kind of trunks, or when so and so was wearing the gold thing. But I can't remember. It's like I don't remember that exact match or city.
But it's just one of those things. Like I just pick up like little details that just file away in my brain, and then I can just bring them up in conversation.
I wonder what side of the brain that is, because I think it's the difference with being able to navigate somewhere by like landmarks. Like I use a map, but I always remember it's like, oh, it's by the Big Chicken, or by the place that was selling watermelons on the side of the road that looked like it was going to break down. It's like we have to turn left there if we're trying to get back to a place. I remember that stuff along with not necessarily the name of the road. So I think that might be the same thing when it comes to wrestling matches. Or I used to be able to do it with issues of comics, but comics change so much now. And they changed numbering, and that's like, oh, well, we restarted it here. So I remember things by art teams and storylines more than what issue number it was. But there are so many people that will tell you the exact issue number that it was.
Man, I would love to continue pro wrestling, but I've taken up enough of your time. This has been very enjoyable.
I feel like we haven't even talked about comics.
No, I was
do draw
I was going to
comics
go
and I
back
make
into
stuff,
comics,
you guys.
actually. I was going to go back into
I
comics.
thought you were like, we're cutting it. It was like,
No.
we've done enough. You're going to
No.
have to edit this.
No,
Or
well,
not edit it.
I'm going to edit out the part when the kid walked up,
I don't know,
which
maybe
you'll
we
never
should-
see, but still.
We should maybe keep the part where the kid walked up, because that was really cute. He obviously
If you want me to leave it in there, I can do
he
that.
was really interested in the fact that there was a camera here. I think you should. It should show that we're actually at a place with people at it. So.
Well, man, my style of interviewing is try to be conversational and talk with the artist or the guest about
Really?
things that
I
they
had
like
no
talking
idea.
about. Well, because like I was like, oh man, initially I felt I was like flopping. I was like, oh no. I was like, I'm trying to connect with her, and then, and
Me?
then
No. I just like there were questions I didn't have any set answer to. Remember, I'm the first person that Marty DeRosa ever had to do 2 episodes of
Yes.
Wrestling with Depression to, because we were just hanging out, talking, and I obviously am not succinct about much anything when it comes to talking. And then he was like, we've done this for we've been talking for 4 hours, so I think I'm gonna have to cut this in half for the first time ever. I'm like,
no,
oh,
man,
I'm
and that was
sorry.
both episodes of that podcast. That was very enjoyable to listen to and to learn about you.
Oh, good.
And then I'm sorry to hear about with the grandma situation. You know?
See, you do remember things.
Yeah.
Well, it's a thing. It happened.
I mean,
Right now, there's worse things happening to other people.
I wasn't even gonna bring that up. It was just I was like, oh, I know Marty
obviously-
DeRosa from Colt Cabana, and I was like, oh, she might be talking about pro wrestling. And then when you went into pro wrestling, I was like,
Well, it
oh my
is.
goodness.
But I mean, there's obviously the depression part of the podcast that
course.
covers, and it wasn't necessarily depression. It was, I had to really understand that comics kind of saved my sanity at a time when other people would have, succumbed to doing something else, escaping some other way, where my escapism was into fantasy worlds created by Chris Claremont and John Byrne and the Brothers Hernandez and other things like that. And, other teenagers in my situation may have suddenly become alcoholics or, gone out, gotten into trouble. And
So you're making me emotional. I can relate to. I didn't have a totally.
everyone's got something.
Yes, I know.
And
So.
not everybody, there's no perfect anything.
Oh, I'm getting the go home cue from the guys, so we're gonna have to wrap
Where?
this up. I just saw it's all
The
good.
staff guys get him out of
right,
here.
Yeah, so
It's all good.
they didn't want me really taken away from you
I don't-
talking to people coming through and stuff like that. But I've really enjoyed this.
I've enjoyed this too.
So I guess I'll go into
One more question. You have 70. He has
The last 3
70,000
questions, though.
under. There's a big long.
well, the last
thing
2
on the
questions
table.
that I always wrap up things.
Oh, okay.
If people wanted to find out more about you, where could they go online?
Haven't I said everything ever about me? No, I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Not Twitter so much anymore because it's become kind of a mean place. But I'm the Jill Thompson on Instagram and Twitter, and I have a Facebook which has all the friend requests up to it. And unless you like comics, I'm not just gonna friend you, or unless you like my comics. because I think sometimes on Facebook people just see they just try and friend everybody that people they know friended. And I was like, who are you? Where did you come from? And also, they could be Russian bots. And I have regular Russian friends that I like. I just don't need fake ones doing bad political things. You can find me there.
Okay.
And at comic conventions. I'm not too tough to find online.
Fair enough. Final question. What would you like to say to your fans out there?
What would I like to say to my fans? Thank you so much for being my fans. It's a really nice thing to actually have fans and to do something that people enjoy. I'm going to try and make more things that you'll like, and I hope that what I do makes your day more entertaining.
All right, well, Jill Thompson, thank you so much for this interview. I really appreciate it. Folks, this is...
I would shake your hand, but you're carrying 2 microphones.
Well, folks, this is Joe from MIGeekScene here with Jill Thompson at the Cherry Capital Comic-Con. Take it easy.
I haven't had enough cherries since I've been here. It needs more cherries.
Take it easy, folks.
Bye.